Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3.
Bonjour, Carole. Just sound and video check.
I can see you and hear you.
All right, merci. And I'll be down in a minute to do that, to sign those documents.
Perfect, merci.
Bonjour, Madame la Vérificatrice Générale. Nice to see you.
Bon matin. Bonjour, Madame Gagnon.
Bonjour, conseil.
Comment ça va?
Ça va très bien, merci. Et vous?
Très bien, merci. Good morning, Councillor Kavanagh.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, ça
Vous
va?
avez eu une coupe de cheveux?
Oui. Nice.
Nice.
You're doing well, Teresa. You're doing well.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Bonjour, Monsieur Conseiller Chantiri. Nice to see you. The Conseiller Kavanagh, Councillor Meehan, the Auditor General. It's like a party.
Yeah.
Councillor Curry, welcome.
Somebody told me this was like the best committee. Councillor
Had I
Cloutier?
known
I think
you
it
were
was
coming,
Jean
we
who
would have
told
brought
you that.
hats and balloons, hats and
I
balloons.
I think the chair is trying to sell it as the best committee. So
It's a toss-up between this and IT subcommittee.
yeah,
And I hit the jackpot.
Councillor Kerr and I, we spend the morning on Zoom already. So
I just came from the Christmas cheer breakfast. I had to rush over. It was running overtime.
yeah, I think we were at the Christmas breakfast on Zoom with the Western Ottawa Resource Center.
Oh, yes, yes, I did that before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do phenomenal job. Those folks.
Yeah, I would have gone.
They're amazing. Very fun.
Yeah, I like the in-person breakfast. Anyway,
Believe it or not, Teresa, I started that tradition when I was on the board, 2002, 2001, 2002. But then Peggy Feldmate and I, we had to resign to run for an office. So
Bless
with
you,
the-
Carol Ann.
bless you.
Yeah, you think about the people that have been through the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center as leaders, Eli, it's just unbelievable people. And they still are, you know, they're just maybe in a different capacity, just doing something else that's amazing. Great, great people.
even some of their staff has been there for over 20 some years.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get the Christmas Lebanon, the Lebanon Christmas question right?
No, I didn't for some reason. I don't know why. Well, I've been out of there for 46 years. You can see why. No, I didn't.
Oh,
I
that-
got the Ukraine one for sure. I got the Sweden one, yeah, but I didn't get the Lebanon. So I got Japan as well, the Kentucky Fried Chicken. So
We will be starting in about a moment. Carole, est-ce qu'on a une apparence de quorum?
Do you think that we have quorum right now? Kathleen?
Councillor Duroux.
I couldn't find my mute button.
You
We've
think after 18 months, you know where that was? That we're just missing Councillor DeRuse, you're saying?
Councillor
Yes.
Daruz. I don't see Councillor Hughley, but he might have.
There he is.
There he is.
Okay, we're going to start in 30 seconds.
So it's just Councillor Hubley and I, we went to the same hair cutter and we got the price 2 for 1. So that's why we look alike today.
I'm glad you're looking for deals, but support local, Eli, support local.
That's right. That's what we did. It was local.
Okay.
Trust me, it was local.
We're prepared for the fifth wave. And when they close the barber shops again, we're not getting caught off guard this time. Never again will I be called a hippie.
Funny, that's what Maha said.
Long-haired hippie. All right.
Okay, this could be the best committee. You're right, okay? So far, this is the best
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Caron, on est prêt? T'es correct, toi? Oui, good.
Are we ready?
All right. Thank you.
Here we go.
Good morning, everyone. Bienvenue tout le monde. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the most fun committee, the Audit Committee. Again, being conducted by virtual means through Zoom. Bienvenue au comité de vérification et notre réunion du 3 décembre.
So this is the
Reminder to keep
December 3rd meeting.
until I ask you to speak. If at any point you want to speak, you should use the raise hand Zoom function. You'll find it at the bottom of your Zoom window, which I know you know well, and near the audio controls. And our committee coordinator, Caroline, and I will be watching for those cues, and the usual 5-minute speaking limit will apply. We have no public delegations signed up for the agenda items today. However, members of the public are welcome to provide written comments, which will be circulated to members of council. And I do note the presence of our newest councillor, Councillor Curry. Bienvenue, Conseillère Curry. Welcome to the audit.
Merci beaucoup.
I'll remind you all that this meeting is being live streamed and will be archived on YouTube. Carole, roll call, please.
Councillor El-Chantieri,
Present.
Councillor Darouz. Don't see him yet. Councillor Hubley. I see you, Councillor Hubley.
Yeah, sorry, slow on the mute button too, Carol.
Okay. Councillor Kavanaugh.
I'm here. Merci.
Vice Chair Meehan
I'm here.
et Président Cloutier.
Isa.
Vous avez
Yes.
quorum.
Merci, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Just a few comments before we start. Thank you again for joining us this morning for our for the audit committee. I want to start off by recognizing Deputy Auditor General Ed Miner. Ed has advised the Auditor General, Madame Goujon, and me of his retirement early in the new year, and this will be his last audit committee meeting. Ed, it has been my pleasure to work with you in my time as vice chair of this committee and chair of the audit committee. I will miss your soft-spoken but impactful comments, your meaningful and your important contributions to the work of the Office of the Auditor General. And your words, your recommendations, your work carries weight. So on behalf of the audit committee, congratulations, best of luck, and thank you for your work, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Today, we'll be receiving 3 new audit reports looking at the 2022 draft operating capital budget and receiving the 2021 Ernst Young audit plan. Notre vérificatrice générale, Nathalie Bouchon, nous présentera le rapport.
Nathalie Bouchon will be presenting the 2021 report as well as the working plan. This will be for our department on 2022-2023.
Ernst Young, our external auditors, and that is for their audit plan for the city's 2021 financial statements. They would be approved at council in the new year. Item number 2 on the agenda will be our 3 audit reports. Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein and Deputy Auditor General Ed Miner will deliver a presentation on each audit. The order of the presentations will be the benefits processing, long-term disability, the competitive procurement process, and then grants and contributions. After each presentation, members of the audit, after each presentation, there will be a pause and members of the committee can ask their questions. Les membres du comité pourront poser leurs questions après
So
chaque.
committee members will be allowed to ask a question after each segment, each presentation today.
Our third agenda item will be a presentation from the AG on her office's 2021 annual report, recapping what the auditors have done in 2021. Following the presentation, the Auditor General will take questions from committee members. Le 4e point correspond au plan de travail de vérification.
Then point number 4 at the agenda today is the working plan of the OAG. This will be for the period 2022-2023. So we'll see what will happen next year. She will be available to answer questions.
Scheduled to be the committee's 2022 draft operating and capital budget. But with the committee's concurrence, given that there's presentations for the first 4 items, I would ask the committee's concurrence so that we can deal with the draft operating and capital budget first. There is no presentation for this item. If we can deal with it now, finance staff can be released, and as they are here to answer questions, and we have a few motions ready. So do I have, if I could see some nodding, is that okay if we deal with item 5 first in line today? No objections. Councillor Kavanaugh, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, is that, I don't mind dealing with first, but we can ask questions.
Absolutely, of course,
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
of course. Okay, so if everyone's ready, let's start with that. Just going to go through a couple of agenda items. Any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. The minutes from the September 28th, 2021 meeting. Are those minutes confirmed? Seeing no objections, thank you. And so here we are with item number item number 5, the 5th item on the agenda, the 2022 draft operating capital budget. Vice Chair Meehan has 2 motions that Vice Chair, would you kindly provide the first meeting, the first motion on FTEs, and you could give us the roadmap motion so that committee members know what we'll be voting on.
Mr. Chair, you're cutting out sometimes when you speak. I'm not
Am
sure.
I?
So yeah,
Okay, I am at City Hall. I will turn off my camera. Hopefully that will streamline things. But let me know if I continue to cut out, I'll develop a plan B.
Okay. So Carol, is the motion for this, are we going to put it up? I'm just, because we're kind of out of order here, I'm going to find my, there it is. Thank you very much. Okay. So this is where, as the Office of the Auditor General has advised that one of the Deputy Auditor Generals will be retiring in 2022. And whereas as a result of this retirement, the Auditor General would like to reclassify one of the Deputy Auditor General positions to an auditor position. And whereas the Auditor General would like to request one additional full-time employee, which is an FTE auditor position. And whereas in consultation with Finance Services, it has been confirmed that there will be no budgetary impact with this reclassification and additional FTE request. And whereas these 2 auditor positions will enable the Auditor General to redirect work to the appropriate levels and assist the Office of the Auditor General in completing work in a timelier fashion. And therefore be it resolved that Audit Committee recommend the Council approve the reclassification and additional FTEs in the Office of the Auditor General. Excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and we could deal with that motion after we have considered the capital of the operating budget. And Carol, should we put the roadmap motion on the floor now, or
hello?
Just
you can, Mr. Chair, or we can put it up right now and then entertain questions after.
okay. Just if councillors want to look at their budget books, they'll know what pages we are approving and not approving. So let's put it on the floor now, please. Madam Vice Chair.
Yep. Sorry, it's going to. Am I trying to find? Sorry, guys. So sorry. Okay. That the Audit Committee recommend that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Audit Committee 2022 draft budget operating resource requirement. Right punctuation.
And we're good? Okay. Thank you. So there's no presentation. And I think I'm on my screen. Any questions? Raise hand function, and Councilor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this. My question is, in terms of the budget, there was one additional full-time staff I saw, and this change with Mr. Minor leaving. So that's two full-time equivalents. I just want to make sure I understand what those positions we focus on. And I'm particularly interested in terms of the work that's coming up in terms of the investigation on the LRT and how that will fit in.
Thank you much. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. Chair, so essentially, as part of the budget, there was actually a request for 2 full-time employees. These are to assist the office in handling an increase in workload, specifically with regards to an increased number of complaints coming through our fraud and waste hotline. Obviously, the fact that we're taking on more complex audits that require additional resources and extra specialties, as well as you may recall, last December, we adopted the Institute of Internal Auditor Standards. And this essentially has additional requirements from a quality perspective that we have to meet. So the 2 FTEs that we requested as part of the budget is to assist us with those particular items. The reclassification of Deputy Auditor General Ed Miner's position into 2 full-time auditor positions is to assist us to reallocate work to the appropriate levels. In some instances, I feel that we have more senior staff doing work that would be more appropriate at a more junior level. And this would also help us have various audit teams conducting different audits, whereas right now our more junior staff have to switch between audits based off of their availability. So it's really to ensure that we're being more efficient with our audit work. With respect to the LRT, there currently is no budget items included within here. As you may recall, the motion passed by Council allowed the Office of the Auditor General to use the transit operating reserves. So once we're able to better understand the scope of the work that we're going to be completing, I will come back to Council as a whole with likely through a memo to update us to what type of budget implications I believe our work may have on the city.
Thank you. So at this point, because it was so late, you had already prepared your budget when this request came in and through Council for the LRT. So you will come back to Council then to ask for further funds for the study.
Thank you very much again for your question, Councillor Chair. I will come back to inform Council as to the funds provided. I believe the motion that was passed on October 13th allows us to use the reserves already at this point in time, and we already have established contracts that are leveraging the reserves. That being said, we're still trying to determine the scope of the work, and I'm sure I'll have many questions with regards to the LRT and us waiting for additional information with regards to the provincial inquiry on this matter.
Okay, so that will also mean coordinating with the province on what they're doing.
Chair, that is my hopes. I have reached out to them to try and see if they could provide us any additional information as to the tentative scope of the provincial inquiry. Unfortunately, the response I received was very vague, and they indicated that they would respond to our questions when appropriate.
Okay, so that may take some time then to find out what the province is doing and what the Auditor's office here is doing. So it will be not an overlap then, so there will be coordination.
Chair, yes, my hopes is to ensure that we are not duplicating any efforts. As we get to our last presentation of the day to discuss our audit work plan, we'll get into a little bit more detail there, and I'm sure I'll have some questions as to what is our plan at the current moment with regards to the one LRT audit that's on the audit work plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I am not seeing any other questions. And thus, with respect to the first motion that was read by Vice Chair Meehan on the FTEs, is that motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you. With respect to the second motion, the roadmap motion, is that motion carried?
Carried.
Okay. And I don't know if carried is, if I need this, and so is the item carried as amended? Yeah.
Yes.
Carried.
We're good. Excellent. Thank you. Merci. for that. We are back to item number 1 on the first item, Ernst Young financial statement audit plan for 2021. And we have Nita Myers from Ernst Young. Good morning, Ms. Myers, welcome. You have a presentation, I understand, and then Ernst Young can respond to questions. Isabel Jasmine, I believe, will be here also to respond to questions if there are any. Ms. Myers, proceed when you are ready.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if the presentation will be short. Yes, it will be okay. Thank you. So with that, I will start my presentation, and then I will transition it to my senior manager, Lisa Godet, who is also joined from EY, to talk about areas of emphasis, and then I will return and conclude the presentation. At any point, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them during the presentation or at the end of the presentation as it may fit. So I will direct to page number 2 of our presentation. It describes our services. Specifically, we are engaged to provide the financial statement, the opinion on the consolidated financial statements of the City of Ottawa for the fiscal year 2021, as well as the audit opinions on various related entities and the grant programs that are due within the same period. On slide 3 of the presentation, we describe our planning materiality. So our planning materiality is based on professional judgment, and we take into consideration both qualitative and quantitative considerations. So based on the operating budget for 2021, we estimate the materiality to be 108 million, which represents around 2.75% of budgeted operating expenditures for the fiscal year 2021. We do review the materiality, and at our conduct of the audit at year end, we will be reviewing it based on the actuals of the expenditures. And if there are any significant changes, we will be adjusting our materiality accordingly and communicate this fact at the results level in May. In terms of our audit approach on slide 4, we are gonna do a controls reliant approach as well as a substantive approach. In terms of our IT general controls, we will be auditing IT general controls in relation to the systems that support the financial statement audit of the City of Ottawa, specifically test of change management, logical access, and IT operations. We plan to integrate data analytics as part of our audit approach. Every year, we try to adjust our approach and apply data analytics to more and more sections of the file. This year, we intend to apply over journal entry testing and any other accounts to provide our insights for the audit results. For the remaining significant processes, we will be conducting substantive audit approach, as we believe that this will result in more efficient audit approach for this year based on the nature of the accounts. So I'll transition to Lisa to go through the areas of audit emphasis briefly.
Thanks, Vida. So if we can go forward to the next slide, actually, I think it might be 2 slides ahead. So the next one after this. Perfect. So our areas of emphasis, I'll just first off by saying that they are consistent with the previous year audits that we've performed. So our first area of emphasis is revenue recognition. Our procedures will consist of a combination of substantive analytical procedures as well as tests of details, and will include user fees, the various tax revenues, government transfers, and development charges. The second area of emphasis is tangible capital assets. So we perform testing over additions, disposals, depreciation, and we will also consider the possibility of impairment. On the next slide, we list our other remaining areas of emphasis: investments, employee future benefits, contingent liabilities, commitments, and the impact of COVID-19. We will substantively test the existence and the valuation of the investments through confirmation as well as a test of details. And we will look at an impairment of investments in compliance with the investment policy as well. For the pensions, we engage our internal specialists to review the assumptions and the methodology used by the actuaries, and we test the underlying participant data. For contingent liabilities and commitments, we will test the completeness of management's assessments for each of those. We'll confirm the status of significant claims with both internal and external legal counsel, and we'll review any significant contracts that need to be disclosed. Finally, for the impact of COVID-19, we will discuss any changes to the business in the year with management, and we will look at the accounting for any new significant agreements, such as the government funding that's been received during the year. I can answer any questions now, but if not, I'll pass it back to Mita to conclude our presentation and leave the questions till the end if possible.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. So the next section of our presentation on page 7 just describes some of the accounting and auditing developments that has happened during the year. Specifically, one that's probably just on the radar currently with the Standards Board is the implementation of the international strategy. So specifically, the adaptation of international public sector accounting standards and principles, which might result in some of the changes, potential changes, whether significant or not so material, as the new standards get developed in the near future. In the next slide, we present our timetable. So we did conduct our planning as well as our interim work. We will be doing our year-end work in late March, April, and we'll be presenting to you the results of that work sometime at the end of May, early June timeframe. With this, I would like to close the presentation and open the floor for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Myers and Madame Godet. Merci énormément. Questions now, and Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mita. And when you talk about the COVID-19 and the changes, obviously quite a bit of change happened this year with the COVID and last year. So, and you said you will be dealing with management to see how the funding from other, can you elaborate a little bit about this? Like, because we already have almost 21 months now with COVID. So this is our second year. So what would change this year from previous year when it comes to the COVID?
Sure, sure. Thank you. I will take this. In terms of the COVID-19, you're absolutely correct, Councillor, that COVID-19 has been and had a significant impact on 2020, and there were a number of funding programs, both impacting the actual funding of the city, the main funding, as well as various programs that the city is dispersing funding for. In this year, for 2021, we'll continue to assess, I think, from the how much funding was received, additional funding, as well as any impairment situation, whether it be related to the assets that the city holds, such as recreation centers, LRT, anything that has been impacted other than the regular that was pre-COVID situation. So we will continue an assessment. It's more not a new assessment, but a continued assessment if there are any other impacts that COVID-19 pandemic specifically had an impact on. That answers your question.
Well, thank you, Ms. Myers. And Ms. Myers, you mentioned also about the unfunded liability or funded liability towards staff. And are you satisfied we still have, in comparison, you know, I ask that question every year almost, in comparison to other municipality, where are we? Are we in the middle of the pack? Are we high? Are we low? Like, I mean, this is very, I think, important funding to make sure we deal with it. I'm interested in your opinion.
Perhaps I will just answer from our perspective, from the audit perspective, and then perhaps management can also chime in, Isabel, if you're online. So from our perspective, we don't necessarily benchmark to other municipalities. From the audit perspective, we do involve our internal actuaries to make sure that the assumptions that are being used to calculate various actuarial liabilities are consistent in the industry And if there are any anomalies or any deviations, we usually have a discussion with management and with the pension specialists. And maybe Isabel, you can talk
Sure.
specifically about unfunded.
Yeah, so several years ago, council did approve a reserve policy, and in that policy, we identified that we need to maintain between 9 and 12% reserves of the overall unfunded liability, and we've been maintaining within that percentage. We look at it over several years. We don't just look over the next year, we look over 10 years to identify the overall liability requirements and then make sure we maintain sufficient reserves.
Isabel, I know we don't contribute to the Ontario benchmark anymore, but do you have any idea where are we with the Ontario benchmark? Are we in other level municipality or different?
When we did the review for the reserve policy, we looked at other municipalities and best practices, and 9 to 12% was the best practice.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor El-Shantiri, Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. I think you got your hands full with trying to see what's happening with COVID and the different revenue sources that are coming in as we get assistance from federal and provincial. It's obviously very, very different, and it's hard to say if it's going to be a pattern or not because we don't know the future. Just even today, we have new variants, etc. So this could continue and could be a permanent feature. But one of the other things I think a lot of people are wondering about is you talk about MPAC and property tax values. And I think that's something of interest is, will this be something also that is being looked at closely? Because I know people expect some changes with the high prices of houses.
Yeah, so from our perspective, from the audit perspective, when we look at the collections and the property taxes specifically, we do review the statistics as well as we get the confirmation for the property taxes collected. On the actual insights analytics, so we do look from the more of an analytic type of insight, if that makes sense, and the audit evidence that supports the specific amount. From the perspective of housing prices, it's more of general external environment that we look for. I think from management perspective, they'll probably be better looking at all the details that are impacting when the collection happens. So I think I don't know if management has any comments to comment on my response.
Thanks, Mita. And Councillor, to your question, the values are going to remain the same. MPAC has announced and the province announced that the next evaluation period is delayed. So those values are not going to change over the next couple of years. We expect something to happen in either 23 or 24. So really, the only change people will see is if they do improvements to their property, because MPAC does track that and provide additional assessment if those things happen, or for new properties that come on the roll, such as a new house that's being built or a new commercial business.
Okay, but what about when you're just purchasing something and it's at a higher price?
Will be the value of that property. They typically will take that value of the property, but they'll actually bring it back to January 1st, 2016, because that's the valuation date that they're using. So they kind of apply it in retrospect.
Okay, I think that's good to know, because people, that's the one thing where it's been, I think people thought we were going to get more revenue, and in other, of course, in other instances we're losing with recreation and transit, etc. So a very complicated situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I'm not seeing any other questions, and so I just have a couple of questions, and thank you, Councillor El-Shantiri, for your questions on contingent liabilities and the pandemic and the risk and to those benefits. Thank you very much. I had a question. I'm not sure if this is to Ernst Young or to our City of Ottawa staff. The actuaries that we use to develop our financial statements with respect to pension liabilities, are they internal City of Ottawa actuaries, or do we go to an outside firm?
I believe they're external.
Yeah,
They're external.
they are external.
What is that firm? Can I see? What's the name?
So they're for the pension plans, the two pension plans that are within the city, not the OMERs. We're talking about the ones that are closed plans. That would be LifeWorks. And then we also use Mercer for the benefits, future benefits evaluation and actuarial calculations.
Yeah, the liability with respect to pensions is, the risk is rather limited, but benefits is higher. So, okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Myers, you spoke, or maybe it was Madame Godin, I don't know, an area of emphasis, impairment of assets. Can you let me know a little bit why? Is there, what has signaled you to that to be an area of emphasis? Which assets?
Sure. So I can start, but Lisa, feel free to add anything additional. So I think specifically, and again, it's due to the length of the pandemic, and because some of the, I would give an example of the recreation centers that are not being used to the full of their potential, there is assessment that is usually performed to see if the economic benefits that you originally set up for the amortization and the benefits that you're getting, if it's the fully service potential if you're receiving, and if it's not, what does this mean for the value of the asset? So similarly for LRT, if there are a lot of delays, if there's not to the fullest potential being used because of the pandemic, not being in service, the ridership is low. So we will be looking at whether there's signs of impairment. And again, we'll be looking from the standpoint of view, temporary impairment versus permanent impairment, and determine if indeed that there has to be an impairment that has to be done for the specific assets.
Okay, so the financial statements contain evaluation of our assets. It's not only based on the physical quality of the assets. The comprehensive asset management plan deals with that, the valuation of assets, but also with how they are being used by our community, and that has an impact on the financial statements. Is that what I understand?
So it does on the service potential, because I think when we set up, we say, okay, we have a service potential of this asset 10 years, 20 years before there's, let's say, a zero residual value, or there's a very immaterial residual value. So it is being reassessed if this is indeed what the service potential is of that specific asset.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. I am seeing no other questions. And so thank you very much for the presentation, and to my colleagues for their questions. Is this item received and carried, that the audit committee received this report and forward to council for information?
Received and carried. Thank you.
Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Merci. We are now to the second item on the agenda, audit reports, the Office of the Auditor General. There will be a presentation by the Auditor General and the Deputy Auditor Generals, and we do have people here, staff for audits and grants. I believe Corey Desormeaux, Dan Chenier, and Donna Gray are here for the audit of grants and contributions. For the audit of progressive competitive procurement process, Will McDonald is here, and for the audit of benefits processing long-term liability, Fraser Allen and Geneviève Ligari are here to answer the questions. But we will be stopping at each segment to ask questions. And so over to you, Madam Auditor General.
Merci beaucoup. Carole, si tu peux partager la présentation, s'il vous plaît.
Carole, could you show the presentation? Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We would like to present to you our audit reports completed this year. My colleagues and I want to thank the city manager, the management, and all staff for their cooperation. I also want to thank the members of my staff, without whom it wouldn't be possible to accomplish so much work.
Our appreciation for the continued cooperation and assistance afforded to our office by the city manager, management, and staff. In addition, I would like to thank my staff, without whom none of this great work would be possible. I'd like to now pass the presentation over to Deputy Auditor General Ed Miner.
Thank you, Natalie. Good morning, Chair, members of committee. We'll be presenting 3 audits today. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. The audit of long-term disability benefits processing, the audit of the competitive procurement process, and the audit of grants and contributions. Next slide, please. So we'd like to begin with presenting the audit of long-term disability, or I'm going to refer to it as LTD, benefits processing. There are currently City of Ottawa employees who are unable to work for a prolonged period of time due to illness or injury. If they meet the employment as well as disability requirements, they may be eligible to receive an income replacement benefit that can continue up to age 65. The bulk of the LTD program is administered for the city by Canada Life, an external service provider. Note that the LTD program is still effectively self-funded by the city. This means that all of the benefits paid out under this program are funded by the city. Internally, the LTD program is coordinated through the Human Resource Services Total Rewards Branch. It manages the contract with Canada Life. In addition, the HR Business Services Branch is responsible for the city's portion of the administration of LTD claims. To do this, there are 9 disability management consultants that act as the city's main point of contact for all LTD claims. Lastly, payroll, pensions, and benefits also plays a role by processing any required employee transactions as advised by the disability management consultants. These transactions are things like starting and stopping pay and manually adjusting vacation entitlements. Here are just a few LTD statistics to provide a bit of scale and context. As of December 31st, 2019, the city had 666 employees on LTD. Of the 320 LTD applications that were processed in 2019, 275 or 86% were approved and 45 were denied. LTD payments by the city totaled roughly $28 million in 2019. Next slide, please. The overarching objective of the audit was to provide council with reasonable assurance that the city's management of LTD benefits program was adequate. The scope of the audit included the management and operational activities of long-term disability benefits for eligible city employees. Transactions from 2019 were reviewed, and as such, this reflects pre-pandemic information. Next slide, please. Now to the findings of the audit. To start with, we looked at the processing of LTD claims, and to do that, we reviewed a sample of 25 claims from LTD claims from 2019 to assess if they were managed in accordance with the processes in place. We went from claims initiation up to the employee's return to work. For the most part, we found that claims were being processed in accordance with the policy. However, the audit did identify process delays in sending out LTD application packages when disability management consultants were not promptly made aware of an employee's absence. There's an opportunity here for HR to remind employees and their supervisors of their responsibility to properly communicate employee absences. The audit also found some inconsistencies and inefficiencies due to a lack of established service standards. These service standards could set out the amount of time that various employees involved in the process have to complete specific tasks. For example, there are no established service standards for disability management consultants to provide employee information to Canada Life. While disability management consultants use an informal 2-week service standard, we found that in 1/3 of the cases we reviewed, they did not provide this information to Canada Life within this 2-week period. As such, there's an opportunity for HR to formalize this requirement and the related procedures. The audit also found that in 4 of the 25 cases we reviewed, the city temporarily overpaid LTD benefits to employees. The total amount of these overpayments was roughly $10,000. Now, due to the complexity of coordinating the starting and stopping of city payroll and the Canada Life LTD benefits, this rate of temporary overpayments is not unexpected or unusual. However, even temporary overpayments result in additional time and effort on the part of HR and payroll staff to reconcile and make the appropriate adjustments after the fact. And also, while in all of these cases, the amounts were eventually collected, there is just an inherent risk involved in overpayments going out because they could be undetected or uncollected. We also looked at how the city evaluates program performance. Effective program performance monitoring is important to ensure consistent and efficient delivery of LTD claims and benefits. The audit found that HR relies on Canada Life to monitor and self-report on the performance of the LTD program against industry service standards, policies, and procedures. HR did not further assess this information to determine if expected performance wasn't actually being met. The audit also found that there were no formal mechanisms to report and monitor the reports going up to the city's senior leadership team on a periodic basis. In fact, in 2019, HR decided to put this formal reporting to the senior leadership team on hold. Lastly, we found that HR developed several documents outlining LTD roles and responsibilities and procedures for city employees. However, the information was fragmented amongst a number of different documents, some of which were outdated and did not reflect current practices. Many of the employees that we interviewed were not aware that these documents existed or know where to locate them. The audit made 4 recommendations, and management has agreed to implement all of them. Next slide, please. If it pleases the chair, we'd now be happy to take any questions related to this audit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miner. Any questions? Councillor Chantieri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Auditor. Ed, it got my attention, the number 666 employee. So, and you said as of December, is that total number with, and if it's a total number, how long back that number been accumulated?
Chair, that's I believe that's the number that was on at that given time. So some of those employees would have been on for a long time. Some of them would have just gotten on, but it's like a snapshot at a point in time. That was the number that were on LTD.
And I'm trying to connect those number with the percentage of employee we have. As you know, we have on any given time between part-time and full-time around 17,000 employees. Is that number present to you concern? Is it high? Is it medium? Is it low? Do we have an idea?
To be honest, that was not the, it wasn't really the scope of the audit. I'd have to defer on that one to management. We were looking at the processes to see how, you know, for the, based on the plan. So we didn't really look to compare to other, say, municipalities or such. But on that one, I would defer to I see Liz is there. I would defer to Liz on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. I'd be pleased to take that question. We have done, there's approximately 12,000 employees that are actually eligible for long-term disability benefits within the city. And we have done benchmarking with other organizations of similar size and scope, and we are in line with those numbers. So we aren't higher or lower, so we are in line. So thank you.
Okay. And my other question, Mr. Chair, is management agree with the auditor's recommendation in this audit?
Yes, we have agreed with all 4 recommendations.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chantieri. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. I couldn't help but wonder if this if there was a concern about fraud, or is that a motivation for doing this audit on these benefits? Or is it simply just to, check in and see how that's being handled? I don't know if that was a concern. Doesn't appear to be.
I would say that the risk of fraud certainly was considered as we were planning the audit. It's something we had to take in mind. That said, there is the process where Canada Life actually does the assessment, and in their assessment process, and I would just point out that not every employee making a claim is accepted for LTD. So again, we didn't look to see. We aren't the doctors or in that sort of thing. However, just to say that a vigorous challenge process does appear to be in place.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Liz has any comments on that.
Yes, thank you for the question. Canada Life has a very comprehensive fraud program, and I'd be more than happy to share additional details. But again, approximately a third of the claims are denied. So there's an extensive review process regarding medical information that is submitted to the carrier, and again, we are confident that there is minimal fraud taking place with long-term disability.
What about returning to work? Is it permanent? Can it be that they can return to work?
Well, it varies, and we have approximately a 72% return rate for people that go on long-term disability. So that's fairly standard within the industry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Vice Chair Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just following up on Councillor Kavanagh's, what is the average length of time someone is on LTD?
Okay, thank you for the question, Councillor. It's approximately 800 days. 800
days, okay.
Correct.
So, and this is a taxpayer-funded liability. Is it subject to the $27.8 million from this 2019 report? So that would be significantly higher today because it'd be subject to cost of living and other
Yes, that is correct. But we've seen stability in claims over the past few years, so any adjustments would be related to cost of living, increases in salaries.
Okay. Do you have any idea of we're going to see an increase during the past couple of years with COVID?
That's an excellent question. To date, we have not, but again, the whole results of the pandemic are still a real unknown to the city.
Okay. Can people ever, is there a possibility to max out the LTD? Do we have employees in that position? And is there a maximum time that we say, okay, there has to be, we have to transition them to something else?
Employees can be on long-term disability up to age 65. But again, our goal is to ensure where possible that employees return to the workplace.
If we have a 72% return list,
yes,
that mean that other people could be on it then, the other approximately 25% could be on this for their lifetime?
Well, up until age 65, and then the LTD benefits terminate.
No, I'm just saying if an employee is 30 years old, they could be on this for...
Yes, exactly, up to age 65. But the average rate of someone on long-term disability ranges approximately 55 years in age.
Okay. Are you concerned with the numbers?
The health and well-being of our employees is number one, and obviously we do not want to see employees go on long-term disability, but it is income protection for employees that are ill. So again, we put all the supports in place to ensure that they are well supported while on long-term disability, but our goal is to return people back into the workplace.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Meehan and Councillor Kavanagh. I see you wanted to get back on the list. I have just a couple of questions before we go for the second round. Deputy Auditor General Minor, what year was this audit put on the work plan? Just following up on.
Yeah, I can explain a bit about it. It was actually put on in 2017. It was put on the 2018 work plan. but it was the audit of benefits. And so when we started that audit of benefits, we actually looked at it and determined that really the processes for managing long-term disability are very different from the other benefits that the city provides, the drug benefits and health benefits and things like that. So we did the audit of the health benefits and the sort of the non-LTD benefits, and that was reported, I believe in 2019. Then we went to start this audit afterwards, and I must admit we did run into some delays with the pandemic because the HR was they requested some time to deal with pressing emergencies, so we respected that and backed off. Then we had some, took us a while to get going again. So that's why it's taken us a while to get here, Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. You spoke of a $10,000 that you found that was of overpayments, and you explained that well. That was on the 25 sample. Is that correct?
Correct, it is.
So that has to be extrapolated through the 666 at that snapshot in time. Get the view, and I understand that. Those assessments that what led to that $10,000 overpayment, errors in payments, was that based on the assessment by Canada Life or in the implementation of payment of benefits by our payroll department?
I would say it was a combination of the two, because it takes a coordination, because as you say, if someone's coming back to work, you want to cut off the Canada Life payments and start their pay again. And vice the same way on the way out, you want to make sure that we aren't paying them their salary while they're getting the LTD benefits. And sometimes that happens because the coordination isn't perfect. And so you do get this. And it's sort of standard in the industry, and you do try to minimize it certainly, but it does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And just one more question before I go back to round two. You said that the reports to senior leadership team had been stopped by HR and maybe to Ms. Stephenson or someone in finance. Was that alerted anyway? Hey, we're not getting these reports anymore. What's going on? Can somebody?
Yep. So I'd be happy to answer that question. The reports, there wasn't a conscious decision to stop reporting to senior leadership team. It was just based on a lack of resources. And subsequently, we've reallocated an FTE within HR and to create a benefits analyst position that will be able to support that ongoing reporting to senior leadership.
And so am I to understand that senior leadership, and I'd like to hear from them, are getting the reports that they deem necessary to properly manage?
Our plan is to report on a semi-annual basis to our senior leadership team, and we'll be starting that in 2022. In addition to that, we do provide our senior leaders with what we call a wellness scorecard that has a myriad of wellness information, including sick leave, LTD, vacation, etc. So,
okay.
So we're planning on making that reporting more robust.
Mr. Chair, I also want to interject that no, the senior leadership team receives a dashboard that we review on all our major indicators: sick leave, work, WSIB, LTD, vacation leave taken, overtime taken, financial reports, where we're at in the audits, where we are in the issues, where are we in the legislative agenda, all those things. We have a dashboard that we track in terms of leading indicators for the organization. So we're aware of the number of cases of how much sick leave in each department, what the total department, what the trends are. It's part of our discussion on a quarterly basis. So I don't want to leave you the impression that we're not monitoring what's happening to our employees, especially over the last couple of years. It's been a huge topic of discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I'm reassured by that. Those are all my questions. Back to round two, Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. Yes, it occurred to me that do we know if these are related to mental health versus physical injuries? Do we do statistics on that? And obviously you do as much preventative measures as possible, but are you seeing any trends that way?
Yes, thank you for the question. Approximately half of our long-term disability claims are related to mental health. And then a muscular skeletal comes second, and then cancers, et cetera, come third. So we are seeing an increase in trending for mental health claims. This again is in line with the industry, and really to mitigate that, we have expanded our employee assistance program. We are expanding our peer network program. We are, introducing mental health training for managers, et cetera. So we're definitely taking measures to work with our employees on their mental health.
Great. Do we sort it by gender? I'm just wondering if there's any trends we see there.
There is a 50-50 split on long-term disability claims for male and female.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Just wondering if there's any particular job that's impacted more than others. Is that something that we look for? Because obviously people on the frontline workers is what I'm concerned about.
With respect to that, it does, LTD walks across all lives within the organization. So again, we're not seeing particular jobs that are impacted by long-term disability.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Thoughtful questions, yes. Seeing no other, we are now on the second segment of item number 2, audit reports, competitive procurement. I don't know if it's Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein or Minor who will be presenting.
You've got me, Chair, so it's
lucky us.
Yes. Well, luck is a good word. We'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going to a bit of background about procurement within the city. The city spends over $1 billion a year on a wide variety of goods, services, and construction. 873 million, or 81%, was awarded using competitive solicitation process in 2019, and the percentage increased to 86% in 2020. Procurement activities are governed by the procurement bylaw and established policies and procedures. The guiding principle of the procurement bylaw is that all purchases should be made using a competitive process that is open, transparent, and fair to suppliers. Responsibilities for procurement are shared between supply services and city departments. Supply services advises and supports departmental representatives through the procurement process while ensuring compliance with the bylaw, policies, and procedures. Departments are responsible for identifying the need for the good or service, developing the specifications and requirements, evaluating the bids that come in, and then finally contract administration. Based on Council's key strategic priorities, the city has identified 5 factors of sustainability to support its efforts towards sustainable procurement. The 5 factors of sustainability are environmental, ethical, economic, social, and cultural. Sustainability in procurement focuses on planning, decisions, and actions that lead to positive, long-lasting results at an affordable price. Next slide, please. The overarching objective of the audit was to provide Council with reasonable assurance that the city's management of the competitive procurement process. More specifically, we assessed whether procurement processes were conducted in a fair and transparent manner, were in accordance with policies and regulatory requirements, provided value for money, and where feasible, aligned with sustainability objectives. We reviewed contracts awarded through the competitive procurement process from 2019 to 2020. The scope of the audit did not include assessing contract administration or individual vendors' performance as part of the contract. Additionally, call-ups on standing offers were not part of the scope. Next slide, please. Now to the findings of the audit. We selected a sample of 30 procurement files to assess actual procurement practices. They were made up of different types of procurement vehicles. File testing focused on different areas within the procurement lifecycle. These included activities related to bid preparation, solicitation, evaluation, and contract award. Overall, we found that the city's competitive procurement process generally adheres to the principles of openness, fairness, and transparency, and is conducted in accordance with the city's procurement bylaw and related regulatory requirements. Notwithstanding this, we did find opportunities to improve certain processes. The audit found that there was limited documentation to demonstrate how sustainability considerations were being incorporated within the procurements. As part of the procurement process, the departmental representative indicates that a sustainability factor has been incorporated. Supply services does not require any rationale or documentation from the departments supporting the identification of sustainability criteria. It also does not validate if and how sustainability considerations were incorporated, given that they are not the technical subject matter experts. Therefore, in our sample, it was not clear from the documentation how sustainability was considered or incorporated, and if there were missed opportunities. We found that departments face several challenges with respect to developing their requirements and specifications. These can include limited knowledge of what's available on the market, current industry practices or technology. They can be too busy to write clear and understandable solicitations, sometimes required in a short time frame. And there can be limited internal resources who have both subject matter expertise in what's being procured and experience developing specifications. The next finding is around documentation and guidance related to conflict of interest outside of the general guidance in the city's employee code of conduct. While the city has implemented practices to mitigate risk related to conflicts of interest, these practices are not formalized or documented. They're applied based on discretion or judgment of supply services and the client department. Formally documented processes and guidance would support a clear, consistent understanding among staff regarding how conflicts of interest are to be disclosed and addressed. In addition, some opportunities we highlighted for management consideration to consider in its continuous improvement efforts. The audit made 4 recommendations, and management has agreed to implement all of them. Next slide, please. At this point, Chair, we'd be happy to take any questions related to this audit.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. And a reminder that Will McDonald, our Chief Procurement Officer, I believe is online to answer questions. And so, committee, any questions for staff or the Office of the AG? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report. I'm just getting to know how it is to work with when you have the contractors in the community, and one of the things that has come up, and I know that you didn't cover this, but I just wanted to get an opinion, especially from Mr. McDonald, in terms of what we ask of contractors when they're signed on, in terms of the relationship with the community. The reason is because they're dealing with claims directly with for residents on any damage on massive projects. We've got massive projects going on all around us in Bay Ward, but being is that the contractor has to deal directly with the residents. Sometimes we find that they're not getting to them quickly. There's not an adequate communication process to deal with them. And of course, we're hands off. And this is a staff inquiry that I made about this, but is this something that could be looked at in future when we're signing contracts with contractors, that they show proof that they have an adequate system to reach out to residents in terms of their concerns when they're making direct claims, so that we know that they're being served. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald, welcome. Did you want to?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. So, Councillor, you noted this was a formal inquiry that you raised. And so this is an element that we are reviewing with infrastructure services and will be addressed in the response to the inquiry.
Thank you very much. I just thought this would be a good time to raise it, since we're reviewing our relationship with contracts. It's one more thing to consider. It's their relationship with residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Vice Chair Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let's see if I can word this properly. Do we evaluate the procurement process with the outcome of a project to see where we could have done better or where we did really well.
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand the question correctly, is this regards to supplier performance or with regards to lessons learned in the implementation?
Supplier performance. We go into this with 5 objectives, and I think cost was in the middle of the 5 objectives. Just wondering if at some point we evaluate how the project, the completion of the project, and whether it was up to the standards that we expected, and then compare it to the procurement process to see if it lived up to what our expectations.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the city has a vendor performance management program. There have been approximately 3,500 projects that have been opened within VPM with an average vendor score of greater than 80%. Less than 1% of projects have resulted in scores of less than satisfactory, which is a strong indicator that the city is delivering successful projects.
That's great. And is cost, I know that, we've been accused in Ottawa of going with the lowest bidder. Is this discussed, and do we get value for money?
Mr. Chair, 100% of the city's contracts are awarded based on best value. There are instances when best value is defined by the bidder offering the lowest cost, but the vast majority of contracts are assessed based on not only technical criteria that are outlined within the solicitation process, as well as the vendor's history having delivered projects of similar scope and complexity successfully for other like organizations, or through our vendor performance management figures.
Okay. Good. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. And yes, Councillor Meehan, you're right. Buying the lowest price is not buying value. And I certainly agree that we need to have value for the residents of our city. Thank you, Mr. McDonald and all. And so that is the second segment of the audit reports. The third segment, and I just want to note for members of the committee, Corey Desormeaux is not with us, but Wendy Stephenson is with us. So welcome, Madam Treasurer. If there are questions, Dan Shaney and Donna Gray are also here to answer questions. And so on to grants and contributions.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. So the third and final audit that we'll be presenting today is the audit of grants and contributions. A bit of background about grants and contributions, or I'm going to just refer to them as G's and C's. G&C programs are approved by council, and they provide funding to local organizations for projects or initiatives that help achieve council priorities and city objectives. Individual city departments are responsible for gaining council approval for funding programs, selecting recipients, managing the funding programs, monitoring the recipients to ensure they achieve the intended purpose of the funding. The Finance Services Department coordinates overall reporting of G's and C's on ottawa.ca. And Finance also provides guidance on compliance with the city's G&C policy and procedures. Dollar-wise, in 2019, the city awarded $65 million to 106 recipients throughout 49 different G&C programs. This money is very important to the viability of many of these organizations all across the city. Next slide, please. The objectives of this audit were to assess whether the city had adequate G&C administration practices. This meant reviewing key compliance elements in each of the 7 stages of the G&C life cycle, these being design and planning, pre-award, evaluation and award, administration, performance monitoring, close, and then reporting. The scope of the audit included all G&Cs that city departments administered between 2018 and 2020. While city practices to monitor recipients' performance were within scope, we did not actually go out to assess individual recipients' performance. So we focused on what city staff were doing, not on the G&C recipients. Next slide, please. The audit found that overall, GNC funding departments generally adhere to the city's GNC policy and procedures. We observed proper program approvals, clear defined objectives, eligibility criteria, and accurate payments. Programs were also found to have objectively evaluated applicants and made selections based on documented criteria. The audit did note, however, some opportunities for improvement. We grouped our findings so that there's first set relates to the governance, oversight, and issues that are found across GNC programs as a whole. We found that the city's GNC management processes are decentralized, which in and of itself is not a bad thing or a good thing. However, while individual program owners are expected to maintain compliance with policy and procedure, there is no central location or person or system for monitoring Gs and Cs to ensure that they actually are in compliance with the city's GNC policy and procedures and are being administered in a consistent manner. Furthermore, we noted that increased collaboration is needed to share best practices and find ways to manage common challenges faced by the funding groups. Increased collaboration might also allow finance to play a greater role in creating processes and templates that can be leveraged across multiple programs. The audit observed that improvements are required to ensure effective records management. Currently, several different repositories are used to store information, and significant manual administrative work is required. As a result of this, the need for a grants management system has been recognized by managers of several of the larger GNC programs. In fact, the community funding program already has a system developed for their use. We believe that other programs should assess whether the same system can be used. This could allow other departments to take advantage of best practices from that system as it has already been developed. The audit noted, however, that there are a few opportunities for new organizations to access city funding. Out of the $64.9 million in funding for 2019, only 7% was awarded to new recipients. Over the years, GNC funding has not increased significantly, and most agreements with existing recipients are continually renewed. Without making funding available to new eligible applicants, the city could be excluding organizations that may be better positioned to address the existing and emerging needs of the community. Next slide, please. Continuing with our findings related to the GNC programs as a whole, one of the areas that we examined was conflicts of interest. I should start by stressing that we did not observe any instances of conflicts of interest in our work. However, we noted that many programs do not require employees to make conflict of interest declarations specific to the programs in which they are the decision makers. This is a requirement in the GNC procedures. Instead, reliance is placed on adherence to the city's overall employee code of conduct. We looked to see if funding agreements were signed on time. Our testing found 2 instances where funding agreements were not signed before the funding term began and payments were issued. This creates a risk that funds are given to recipients without requiring their written commitment to the terms and conditions of the agreement. Most of the GNC programs that we examined required that the recipient organizations have to submit financial and other program information to allow city staff to confirm that the funds were being used as intended. Our sampling of specific funding programs showed evidence that staff were collecting such information from GNC recipients. However, in some programs, we could not find documented evidence that staff were using this information to actually monitor the recipients, nor that their managers were approving any monitoring activity going on. The audit found that the documents required from recipients do not provide sufficient information on the day-to-day activities of the organization that would be necessary to demonstrate that the funding dollars were being used as intended. In our opinion, the city would need to obtain more program-specific information related to the outcomes achieved in order to adequately evaluate the programs. Reporting of outcomes of GNC programs serves to inform stakeholders how the funds were used. The audit found that reporting of outcomes to council ranged from only budgetary information to brief program summaries. There were no formal reports detailing the achievement of specific outcomes in relation to the goals of the program. Next slide, please. second set of findings relates to two of the specific GNC programs that we sampled. All applicants to the arts funding program, regardless of the dollar value of the funding request, are subject to the same application and reporting requirements according to the funding stream. The amount of these requests vary greatly, from $1,500 to almost $150,000 in 2019. The process may be unnecessarily onerous for both organizations that are requesting only a small amount of funding, as well as for long-standing recipients who are almost certain to continue to receive funding. Another large funding program that our audit reviewed was a housing and homelessness investment plan, rent supplements program. As you're probably aware, the city has indicated that there is a significant need for more rent supplement units. To increase the attractiveness of the program, a number of incentives are offered to landlords. These include higher than market rents, where market rent is determined by CMHC, paying reasonable costs for damages, and paying for rent for up to 2 months during periods of vacancies. With these incentives in place, we believe that the city could be missing out on landlords with quality housing units that might like to participate in the program. While this is due to a lack of available funding, it's also part of, and we believe, due to a lack of information being posted on ottawa.ca and the low unit turnover of households in receipt of rent supplements. We also noted that prior to 2021, the city did not monitor landlords to ensure that maintenance standards were being met. This resulted in a risk that the city could be paying high rents for units that were poorly maintained. We noted, though, that the new rental housing property management bylaw, which came into effect in August 2021, the bylaw is expected to help city staff ensure tenants have housing that is in good state of repair as required by the rent supplement agreements. We made 12 recommendations in the audit, and the city has agreed with all of them. Next slide, please. And we would now be happy to take any questions related to this audit.
Very much for the presentation, and I did update who is available to answer questions. And Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Deputy Auditor. Did I hear you say to agreement the receive fund, or to group receive fund without signing agreement? Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
They received the funding before the agreement was signed. It was signed eventually, but they received the funding before that was in place.
And so there's two were not signed out of how many? Out of how many agreement? I'm just trying to put it in a context.
Oh, sure. Certainly, out of the 16 that we reviewed, 16 detailed recipients. So 2 of the 16.
Okay. Well, just for my colleague, for the reason I asked for that, because we have community association in the rural area receive funding from the cities through some of these programs, and it's run by volunteers. Sometimes it's so hard to, we try to help them, but still, sometimes it's hard to get volunteers to come by. My other question, and I'm not sure if it's for you, Ed, or staff going to answer this. To my understanding, we do have a standing offer with some of the landlord, and I understand from this item, like sometimes we pay more because we are on short notice. Sometimes we need a bigger place where or large apartment where can accommodate 4 or 5 family member. So I'm trying to understand from staff, is there a standing offer with some of those, I don't know what you want to call them, special landlord or landlord with the large property can house more people, like more than just a motel or a hotel? Is there staff can answer this?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'm actually going to call on my colleague, Ms. Gray, to answer it. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Councillor, you're right. We use the rent supplement program that is the subject of this audit is just one component that we use to provide housing or provide housing subsidies to families. So depending on the nature of the family and depending on the circumstances, we can use a rent supplement, which this program's about. We can use housing allowances where we have more flexibility around tying that benefit to a family and the size of the family and the needs of the family. And then we also have landlords that we work with when we need to place larger families in emergency situations as well. So there's a range of options that we use. This is just one program and one option that's available to landlords.
And Donna, if you can please elaborate a little bit. When we talk about, when you mention the landlord with the house and large family, and we heard in the past, especially on my committee, sometimes we might have to pay a little bit more because to be able to access that, because you might pay a little bit more here, but you're saving instead of renting the family 3 or 4 rooms in a hotel or a motel. Is that do I understand this correctly? Is that what sometimes happens?
Yes, you're correct, Counselor. In an emergency situation, you know, our number one priority as a large family shows up on our doorstep on a weekend, an evening, et cetera, is to get them someplace safe. And so one of the vehicles that we do have is the ability to place in an emergency situation in a facility that can accommodate that family. Typically, we would use our family shelter. For a large family, we would start, if that's unavailable, then we would look at hotels and motels. And in some instances, we also look at landlords as well. And then we're using our available emergency funds to be able to place that. But those are usually short-term durations and have, you know, more supports than just like what a hotel would have. And so, yeah, in those instances, we do have the capacity to pay more for those accommodations.
Thank you very much, Donna and Ed, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chantiri. Conseillère Kavanagh, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Président.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate this report. I think this is probably one of the most important things that we do is help people get into housing. One of the concerns I have in terms of new landlords is smaller landlords. I think we tend to go to the larger ones, and it's kind of built in. But how can we get smaller landlords involved as well? Is that cumbersome to have more? Do we have the capacity in terms of our staff just to manage bringing in more? I know we're, you know, it says very clearly that it's, you know, it's always complete, but I just want to know how can we refresh and bring in new landlords from time to time?
Is that for Ms.
For Donna?
Yes, I was just going to ask my colleague Donna to answer that question. Thank you, Donna.
Sorry about that. I was just waiting to see who you were directing it to. Yes, Counselor, you know, the intent, and I think in the intent of the audit and the recommendation of the audit is that we do just that. How and what efforts are we doing to increase the visibility of these programs to landlords, which I think in this housing situation is such an important recommendation for us. And we have committed, and although there is currently information on ottawa.ca, we've committed to enhance that information. We also have in the last months created an information package that we have put out to the Eastern Ontario Landlords Association as a vehicle to reach out to the full range of landlords, large and small, and have conducted 2 housing blitzes where we have been working in partnership with the Eastern Ontario Landlord Association, the Alliance to End Homelessness, and local housing providers and social services agencies to really try to increase the breadth and scope of housing options that we have available, of which we could use these benefits, the rent supplement benefits, but also our housing allowances to support that.
I sure hope so. And is there any chance that if we did have more options there, that we wouldn't need to go to the motel option? as much? I know it's a different category, but how can we make that transition so people can get permanent housing quicker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, our number one priority is to get people into housing and also to divert people from homelessness and to pursue every option when they call us around how we can ensure that they are diverted from hotels and motels and our family shelters. Sometimes it's just the nature of the circumstances, the condition with which people are coming into homelessness, the family situation. Those sometimes warrant something that has to be done on a crisis and an emergency because we want to keep a family urgently safe. But every effort that we make is to ensure that we're trying to divert or quickly get families into housing. It is not to use the hotel system as a housing option.
Yes, which unfortunately is still there. In terms of inspections of units, we have passed bylaws now to stipulate that they have to pass a checklist. But oftentimes when you're putting people in who don't know who to complain to, and they just take what they get. They don't speak up, even if things are substandard. How is that being dealt with?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and one of the recommendations in the audit is to strengthen that role of the city. Typically, the landlord and responsibility of landlord-tenant relationships rests with the tenant, and the protections that council has enhanced are important protections that tenants have available to them. We will, on the basis of the recommendations of the audit, though, take on where we're seeing, instances of continued issues around property standards. We will play that role in supporting the tenant to have support to deal with the landlord, understanding that under the legislation, our requirement is that we have signed consent of both the tenant and the landlord to enter that property and the tenant to actually act on their behalf to get the necessary supports that they have. And those will be implemented as part of the recommendations of the audit.
Thank you. When can we get an update on that to see how things are moving forward based on these recommendations?
I would say based on how we're doing our follow-up process now, sort of as they become due, as the see in the response to the recommendations, they're identifying, management identifies a time when they're going to be, when they anticipate being able to action them, and we'll be following those up sort of as they come up, and then providing, I guess, providing in summary, at a summary level, the responses and identifying any key items that we believe are not being actioned on time. I don't know if I should speak for my boss, who's going to be here after I depart.
I see sorry, the Auditor General has just, I think the Auditor General would like to supplement the answer.
Okay,
I'll
thanks.
Compliment off of that one. As the Auditor General, Ed Minor, mentioned, our follow-up process is to take a look at recommendations as they come due. As you see throughout the report, there's various due dates with regards to all the various actions. Most of them are towards the end of 2022, I believe, the fourth quarter, and then some aren't until 2024 when we start talking about larger items such as review of frameworks and things of that nature. So you'll likely see the ones with regards to Q4 2022 towards the spring of 2023, or perhaps a few months past them.
Okay, well, I really appreciate this. I think this is one of our most important jobs, and I'm glad that we're working very closely with our partners, such as the Alliance to End Homelessness and other activist groups out there that are working on this cause as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Yes, indeed, it's a valuable audit. Councillor Curry, and again, welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Cloutier, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not on this committee, but I do want to echo what Councillor Kavanaugh just said. This is an unbelievably important audit. It echoes so much of what I have heard from the Ottawa Community Foundation and the 22,000 not-for-profits and charitable organizations that they get applications from. that there's a lot of work to do. And it's not to point fingers and blame anyone, but when large systems are trying to help small groups, and small groups are fighting fires and have their heads down and don't necessarily have the expertise to write the grant applications or do the performance appraisals at the end, or the not the performance, but evaluate their programs. Were they effective? Did the money actually do what it was supposed to do? You end up with a system that's not super coordinated, and yet we rely on and expect it to be doing all these amazing things. So this audit, the 12 recommendations, I can't tell you how happy I am to see them. It's the challenge for us will be that it takes a long time to work through some of these recommendations, yet at the same time, people are needing help instantly. So I guess one of the things I would just say is that the more we can work with the Ottawa Community Foundation, Ottawa Community Housing, and the groups that Councillor Kavanagh listed, the Alliance to End Homelessness, there's some amazing groups that could really help us get more focused. If we're going to move monies from a police budget over to social services, the social services have to have the capacity and the ability to do what we want them to do. I don't know that they do, and I don't know that we know which ones do, but this type of audit is critical. So I'm so glad to see it. I'm so glad that the recommendations are there in black and white. And I think that the Community and Protective Services Committee should really look carefully at the recommendations, because they're very important. Anyway, glad to see this. Thank you so much, Councillor Cloutier, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. And indeed, thank you for your thoughtful comments, and you are on point with respect to the bit of the silos that we have. Thank you. Thank you all. Seeing no other questions, that is item number 2, the audit report. And the recommendation is that the audit committee receive the audit reports and recommend that council consider and approve the audit recommendations. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much. Merci. We are now on item number 3, the 2021 annual report. There is a presentation by the Auditor General. And Vice Chair Meehan has a technical amendment to revise the recommendations. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. Whereas the report 2021 annual budget from the Office of the Auditor General is included with the Audit Committee Agenda 14 for the meeting on December 3rd, 2021. And whereas Section 6A of the Procedures Bylaw states the following: reports submitted pursuant to Clause 1I shall be dealt with as follows. Notice of an annual report from the Auditor General shall be given at the meeting of council prior to the meeting of the Audit Committee where the report is to be tabled. The annual report will be referred to various standing committees as directed by Audit Committee and will subsequently rise to council for final approval. And whereas the report recommendation should have included the following wording: and recommend that council approve the 2021 annual budget. Therefore, be it resolved that the Auditor General's 2021 annual report English recommendation be revised as follows: that the Audit Committee receive and recommend that council approve the Ottawa Auditor General's 2021 annual report. And therefore, be it further resolved that the Auditor General's 2021 annual report French recommendation be revised as follows. I need Councillor Kavanagh to read this. Et recommande au Conseil d'approuver le rapport annuel de BVJ 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. That was great. BVJ, Bureau de Vérification Générale. Pardon me, say again?
Je ne parle pas bien le français, excusez-moi.
Oh, thanks.
I don't speak French very well, sorry.
That's the recommendation. That's the technical amendment, which we'll deal with after after we get the report from the presentation by the Auditor General. Over to you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Carole, si tu peux partager la présentation, s'il vous plaît.
The presentation, please, Carol. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm very happy to table my first annual report that is describing the work of the Office of the Auditor General in 2021.
It is with great pleasure that I table my first annual report. This report outlines the accomplishments and work carried out by the Office of the Auditor General in 2021. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît, Carole. L'une des réalisations les plus importantes a consisté à
One of the most important accomplishment was to look at the vision of the office. We need to be recognized as a knowledgeable, collaborative, and respected leader in governance, control, and risk management, and building trust in our municipal government. The lack of transparency can lead to a feeling of insecurity. So the role of the AG is to build a public trust in city administration, and we realize that transparency is one of our major principles in order to support city council.
Establishment of a vision for the office to be recognized as a knowledgeable, collaborative, and respected leader in governance, control, and risk management, and in building trust in our municipal government. The Dalai Lama once said, "A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity." In taking stock of the OAG's role in building trust in our municipal government, we identified increased transparency as one of our key guiding principles to further our success in supporting council. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. In the spring of 2021, we started releasing our reports in advance of audit committee meetings to provide stakeholders the opportunity to read, digest, and reflect on the results of our work, as well as be better positioned to ask our team the tough questions. We continued our journey of transparency through our continued efforts in building collaborative relationships with the city's administration and members of council. These candid discussions led to significant changes in how and when we follow up on past audit recommendations, as well as the manner and timeliness in which the results of our work are reported to council. In addition, we have increased flexibility in our work plan and taken on a more agile approach to auditing key initiatives to provide timely and relevant insights to council. All of these successes were achieved while managing through a pandemic and ever-changing priorities. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. This year, our office reported on 4 audits, 3 of which we just spoke about earlier this morning: the Fleet Services Audit, Long-Term Disability Benefits Processing Audit, Competitive Procurement Process Audit, and the Grants and Contributions Audit. We also performed follow-up procedures on 102 recommendations. Taking into consideration the city's pandemic priorities and the onboarding of a few new staff members, including myself, the office used this opportunity to focus on the execution of follow-up audit procedures, conducting a self-assessment of our office, as well as reviewing and updating internal processes and policies. This enabled us to decrease requests made to city staff to allow them to focus on pandemic-related priorities. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. In 2021, we established a few key performance metrics to ensure the office was running efficiently and effectively, and to identify areas for continuous improvement. In April of 2021, we presented our interim audit work plan with anticipated reporting dates to audit committee and council. For each proposed audit, we have completed and reported on 100% of the audits within the prescribed timeframe. Also this year, we issued 24 recommendations as a result of the audits we conducted. All recommendations have been accepted by management. With respect to our budget, we are currently projecting to be under budget for the year ending 2021. The cost savings are largely due to vacant positions throughout the year. Our audit staff have professional audit certifications and advanced designations. To maintain good standings with the various associations, staff are required to take professional development training every year to enhance their knowledge, skills, and competencies, including ethics. I am pleased to report that all staff have met their respective requirements this year. Also this year, the office revamped the client satisfaction survey that we have to an electronic format that is anonymous. We performed individual audit surveys with all of the auditees, as well as an annual survey of the city's senior leadership team to determine how our office was doing. The survey results showed that respondents felt a very positive change in our audit approach this year. All feedback received will be used in the office's continuous improvement program. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît, Carole. Je tiens à remercier personnellement.
I'd like to thank personally all the members of my staff for their extraordinary contribution to the office and to its success this year. Furthermore, I'd like to express my gratitude to the city manager and the management members for their openness and their cooperation in my first year.
My team has accomplished over the short period of time since my arrival. I would personally like to thank all the members of my team for their extraordinary contribution to the office and its success this year. Furthermore, I would like to extend my appreciation to the city manager and the senior leadership team for their openness and willingness to collaborate through the many changes that I have initiated in my first year. This concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions you may have.
Merci, Madame la Vérificatrice Générale, and yes, indeed. Councillor
Thank you, Madam Auditor General.
Forgive me, Mr. Chair. It's not so much of a question other than a comment. I just want to say thank you so much, Madam Auditor General, you, to your team, to your availability. Even yesterday, sending us an email, making yourself available for question about the audit. And I just wanted to know, we really appreciate all your effort bringing back this office to what really audit's all about, to make improvement and work together as a team, as a management, as an auditor, as a counselor, as a staff, all of us. It is one team, one city, and I want to say thank you to your leadership, because with your hand on a position or in your job, you really brought stability to I want to say thank you, and we'll hope to see you in the next year, and really thank you for all your effort. Thank you, Mr. Chair. See, there was no question, Natalie. That was easy.
Thank you so very much, Councillor.
There was no question, but they were very kind and thoughtful comments, and thank you, Councillor Shantiri. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. I do have a question. So in relation to a comment you made earlier, you talked about the fraud and waste hotline, and you said it was keeping you busy. Can you comment further? Are we getting more inquiries? I know when people come to me and they, say they're frustrated with this and that, and I can't help them in terms of knowing the details of whether we're doing things in the best way we can. And I often say, if you really have an issue, go to the fraud and waste hotline, because I have so much confidence in it. It really does get to the answer if we're spending our tax dollars wisely. And I find it very helpful, though the title bothers me, but it's doing its job. But do you have any comments of why we're getting more, or and how much workload it is?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. Chair, yes, we are experiencing a significant increase in the fraud and waste related complaints. It's also my understanding that this is consistent with the trends members of council are experiencing with their own offices and receiving complaints. The link, I'm not sure. I could speculate that people might have more time on their hands during the pandemic, but that would be pure speculation. What I can tell you is, to date this year, while many of some of the complaints that we are receiving are similar in nature, we have, I think it was just last week, exceeded our 500th report for the year, when generally we receive about 200. Now, some of these are, as I mentioned, linked to potential duplicates, so they don't necessarily make their way over to management for further investigation, but it does take a lot of time on my team's end from a processing perspective and just reviewing. Many of us look at each report that comes in, myself, both deputy auditor generals, as well as one of the senior auditors in our team. We want to make sure that we're triaging everything appropriately. So it does warrant a lot of attention. And as you can imagine, just opening and reading 500 reports throughout the year is extremely time consuming.
Thank you very much. Is this since the pandemic started? Is that when this trend started? I just trying to get an idea if it's related.
Chair, I can say that I believe in 2020, originally we saw a decrease. And then towards the end of 2020, we started seeing a significant ramp up of reports that were coming in, and that trend has continued all throughout 2021.
Well, I'll certainly be interested to see what they are, what they're asking, and what the responses are. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Vice Chair Meehan, please.
Well, I can't wait for that report either, but I'm just wondering if, Madam Auditor General, can you give us an indication, does this have to do with maybe city employees, people in the community perhaps questioning whether city employees who are working from home are maybe working hard enough? I've heard people say, oh, I saw so-and-so out walking their dog. I said, I walk my dog in between meetings, and I'm not going to make apologies for it. If I have a half hour and the sun's shining, I'm going to take advantage of that. But I'm thinking that maybe some of those complaints could be from people in the community wondering whether or not that city employee is doing as much as work as they think they should be doing. Can you say yes or no on that?
What I can say is the nature of the reports that are coming in are a vast variety, as they are every year. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's more specific attributed to those working from home. We get a gamut of different types of complaints that come in.
Okay. And were you able to look at all 500 of those?
So we are currently going through still many that are outstanding. And as I mentioned, some of them are a little recurrent in nature. So we try and look at if it's leading us to what could be a more systemic issue, we look at that systemic issue and not necessarily each report. So that's one of the items that sometimes we have to take a look at and reflect on the best way to look at it. In many cases, we will provide a complaint over to management to investigate, because it makes it a little easier as they have all the information and then they report back to us. In other instances, if we're seeing something more systemic, we will likely hang on to it and take a look at it ourselves.
Okay. Remind me, if you will, in the past, I don't think it was not last year, the year before, I tried to increase the budget for the Auditor General to take the funding for the fraud and waste hotline, which is about 200,000, and fund it from another source. The fraud and waste hotline is still funded through your office, right?
Yes, that is correct. So we are responsible for the administration of the hotline, as well as managing, triaging, and reporting at the end of the day on the various complaints that come through the fraud and waste hotline.
Okay, but now you have a couple extra bodies in order to help you tackle that workload.
Yes, that is correct. In 2022, we'll begin our hiring process, and that should be able to assist us once we've onboarded the staff.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Auditor General.
Thank you very much. And I see Councillor Kavanaugh is on for the second round, but I have a question. Madam Auditor General, can you just remind us when you'll be reporting on the fraud and waste hotline activity and giving us that report?
Yes, Chair, we will be coming in the spring, I believe, currently scheduled for April timeframe. We'll be reporting the annual report on the fraud and waste hotline.
Thank you. And just a reminder to everyone that the intake process for the fraud and waste hotline is, I believe, a third party to protect anonymity. Is that correct? Whether it be a resident or an employee?
Chair, yes, that is correct. So there is both a telephone line as well as a phone line and a web link address, a URL, in order for individuals to report items anonymously. That being said, there's also direct phone calls to our office as well as through our OAG inbox, and then we will process those through the fraud and waste process if we believe they meet that requirement.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give a shout out for the types of subjects you're taking on in the future. I think that people think in terms of the dollar, but you're auditing much more. And that's something I think is really important. I don't know if that is something that we let people know about. I don't think we've really communicated that. Really, but the fact that you're doing an audit on prevention of workplace violence and harassment is really big. This is not. This is about protecting people and ensuring equity. it's a subject I don't think people think of in terms of an audit. We get caught up on the dollar value, and also about the environmental stewardship and about whether we're meeting our goals on climate change with the zero emission bus audit. Those are really big. And when we talk about the hotline, perhaps we should remind people that we're looking at these broad subjects, because people get stuck on, it's important that we have good value for our tax dollars, of course, but the bigger picture of what we should be doing is equity as well. And our commitment, of course, to environmental stewardship. And as we just saw, our commitment to housing and homelessness, which is also an important subject for auditing. So are we able to communicate that out? Because I think this is really important that we let people know about these things.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor. Chair, we can definitely take that back to see what type of communication methods we can incorporate into our day-to-day. Obviously, our work plan is an item that we use as a tool to communicate what we're going to be working on in the future. As I mentioned at Council a few weeks ago, we're also looking to develop our own website separate from that of the city, and that could be also a good tool for us to be able to communicate. We're taking a look at whether or not we want to get into social media as well. So
I would be happy to promote that, and I'm sure other councillors would feel the same way, because we want to show that we're not just, that we're looking at the big picture on the commitments we've made, that we're looking at our commitment to sustainable development and the environment and to equity. So I'd like to have people know about these things, and let's see what the audit shows us. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before we carry the report, I completely agree with Councillor Kavanaugh, Councillor Meehan, other contributors. Madam Auditor General, you've quoted the Dalai Lama in your audit report. It's never been done, but I like it. We need to do better. We need to reclaim that trust of residents, where they send their money and how we spend their money. This organization, how it treats its employees, and I'm referring to Councillor Kavanaugh's thoughtful comment, protecting our data, cyber attacks to continue operations, the expertise to administer contracts, that we have the right plan to provide roads and housing and transit and those services that our residents depend on. And I fully agree, we need to highlight the good work of the Office of the Auditor General so that people understand it a little bit better. Like the change. Thank you for your report today. And just need to find my recommendation. First, on the technical amendment by the Vice Chair. Is that there?
Carried, Mr. Chair.
Carried. Thank you. And on the item as amendment, the annual report.
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. We are on to item number 4. It's the last item of the day. Reminder that we had carried item number 5 previously in the meeting. The 2022-2023 audit work plan by the Office of the Auditor General. There is a presentation by the Auditor General and Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Carole, si tu peux partager la présentation, s'il vous plaît.
The presentation, please, Carole. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We will now present to you the Audit Work Plan 2022-2023. City bylaw on the Auditor General requires that we submit to the approval of Council an annual audit plan. The General Auditor can prepare an audit plan on a longer-term basis. Since there will be election in 2022, we decided to prepare a work plan for 2 years. The work plan will give us an overview of the work that will be done by our office in 2022 and 2023. Today, we will explain to you the audit plan process based on risk, the audit work plan, as well as the emerging issues and the audit horizon.
Requires the Auditor General to submit an annual audit plan to Council for approval. I am afforded a discretion to prepare a long-term audit plan. Given the fact that there will be an election in 2022, my office chose to prepare a 2-year audit work plan. The audit work plan provides an overview of the work that the Office of the Auditor General will be conducting in 2022 and 2023. Today, we will walk you through the risk-based audit plan process, the audit work plan itself, as well as emerging issues and audit horizon. I'd like to now pass the presentation over to Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Audit Committee and Council. Next slide, please. 5 steps were undertaken to arrive at our audit work plan. First, we updated our audit universe. The audit universe represents the potential range of all audit activities and is comprised of a number of auditable entities. These entities include a range of programs, activities, and functions which collectively contribute to the achievement of the city's strategic objectives. We then reviewed various documents such as departmental risk assessments, key corporate documents such as the City of Ottawa Strategic Plan and the 2021 operating and capital budgets, past audits conducted at the city, audits and audit work plans from other municipalities, and fraud and waste hotline reports received. We also undertook consultations with members of council, the senior leadership team, and the Office of the Auditor General staff members to obtain input on strategic and organizational objectives, risk, and anticipated changes and challenges to the operating environment. A meeting was also held with the external auditors to discuss audit coverage of high-risk areas in order to minimize any overlap and duplication, and with other auditor generals to identify global risks and similar areas of focus that could be leveraged. The audit universe, our consultations, and document review enabled us to select and prioritize engagements based on risk. The underlying premise of a risk-based approach is that areas of higher risk require greater oversight. Accordingly, in carrying out our audits, greater weight is given to the examination of the governance, risk management, and controls associated with activities of higher risk. A risk-based approach enables the efficient and targeted deployment of resources and ensures coverage of the city's most potentially exposed areas. Finally, the audit selection process was based on our assessment of risks, available resources, and the need to be agile in our current environment. The plan is flexible to allow the office to respond to emerging needs and issues. The audit selected aim to help the city's administration mitigate risk as well as improve accountability, the control environment, and the efficiency and effectiveness of city operations. Next slide, please. I will now briefly outline audits which were previously approved and are currently underway, but will be reported in 2022. Our zero emission bus audit, Sprint 1, is currently in the reporting phase. The audit of LRT, based on Council's request, has been initiated. We have commenced planning for this audit, but we'll be considering the scope of the province's public inquiry before finalizing the scope of our audit. The pandemic response audit has also recently commenced, and the Ottawa Community Housing Audit is wrapping up and is scheduled to be reported in early 2022. Next slide, please. The audits shown on this slide are being proposed for commencement in 2022. During Q1, we will undertake an audit of integrated risk management. In Q2, we will commence an audit of revenue. In Q3, we will undertake an audit of prevention of workplace violence and harassment. And in Q4, we will undertake a cybersecurity audit. Finally, in the sprints 2 to 5 of the zero emission bus audit are expected to occur throughout 2022. Next slide, please. The audits shown on this slide are being proposed for commencement in 2023. Based on the expected completion for the 2022 audits, we currently have 3 audits scheduled to commence in Q1 of 2023. An audit of corporate diversity and inclusion, an audit of affordable housing, and an audit of progress towards the city's sustainable development strategies. Finally, our audit of management of roadways is scheduled to commence in Q2 of 2023. Next slide, please. Our office will continue to be responsible for the administration of the city's fraud and waste hotline, which is available for employees and the public as part of the city's fraud and waste policy. Our office will review issues raised through the hotline and will present reports of those reviews and investigations to Audit Committee and City Council. The next annual fraud and waste hotline report, as the Auditor General mentioned, will be tabled in the spring of 2022. Based on available resources, the OAG will continue to conduct follow-up procedures to ensure that recommendations made in previously issued audit reports and action plans developed by management are implemented in a reasonable timeframe. The status of the follow-up procedures will be reported twice annually. The next follow-up report will be tabled also in the spring of 2022. Aligned with the commitments made to address the gaps identified as part of the OAG's 2021 Quality Assurance Review, we will report back to Audit Committee on key items such as independence, compliance with the Institute of Internal Auditors International Standards for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing and professional education requirements, evaluation of stakeholder relationships, and additional performance metrics. This will be reported in the Auditor General's annual report. Next slide, please. The audit work plan I've just outlined is based on identified risk and resources. Our office has also considered emerging risks, and as such, we've incorporated flexibility into our audit work plan to ensure the office is able to execute work under its mandate, but also has the agility to quickly shift priorities in line with the changing landscape, as well as manage the burden placed on the city's administration. Examples of such emerging risks relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability and climate change, culture, cybersecurity, and supply chain shortages. Should time permit, we are considering the potential inclusion in the 2022-2023 audit work plan of engagements related to council office expenses, OC Transpo route scheduling and planning, LRT Stage 2 contract and program management, LRT Stage 3 procurement, culture, and the city's waste management strategy. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. We would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Auditor General. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. I kind of jumped the gun earlier. My previous questions were kind of related to this. But one thing I'm looking at the, back to the fraud and waste hotline. I'm looking at the website of Integrity Counts, and it says for anyone who has knowledge of fraud, waste, or other inappropriate activity, can we have it so that people understand that it includes environmental concerns, if they see, that what the city's doing or things like that. I mean, it seems to be based on, tax dollars, that kind of thing. But, in case they, they're concerned about, common one is buses idling or things like that. But is it, because you're looking at the broader picture of equity and environmental standards, but would that include the fraud and waste hotline?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Chair, we're a little limited as to what we can put on the Integrity Counts website. As you can appreciate, it's a third party, and there's unfortunately little customization as to what we can put there. That being said, what can be, and I don't want to put words in the city manager's mouth, unfortunately, but there's always ways for us to provide additional examples within the policy, as well as next year we'll be looking at how we can raise further awareness with regards to the fraud and waste hotline. And throughout our awareness campaign, there could be additional examples such as the item that you indicated. Again, it has to be linked to some form of fraud or waste. That being said, if there are key issues that members of the public do want to raise, they do have the ability to raise that through our OAG email inbox or directly through the OAG's telephone number, where they can reach out to us, leave us a message, or hopefully get us directly when we are in the office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay, seeing none. The one moment, just need to find that the Audit Committee recommend Council approve the Office of the Auditor General's 2022-2023 Audit Work Plan. Is that item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Moving on with the agenda, no in-camera items. Notices of motion from anyone? Not seeing any. Inquiries? Other business? In terms of the next meeting, there'll be a notice of meeting circulated within the next few days advising, asking you to block off the date of February 22nd. That is the expected next Audit Committee meeting. This is the last meeting before the end of the year, and so I certainly want to wish all members of the committee, all members attending today, residents and all, safe and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, wonderful New Year's. And again, to follow Ottawa Public Health guidelines. There will be a media availability at 15 minutes, and so at 5 to 12, 5 to noon, we'll have the media availability. And so with that, Vice Chair Meehan, a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting for the 3rd day of December.
Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Merci.
Happy holidays, everyone.
You too.
Likewise.
Bye.
Merci tout le monde. Have a good day.